Hello and welcome to Zzipp Media Productions for Dig the Street. We're here in Weymouth in Dorset, which is famous for George III taking to the healing waters and its beautiful sandy beach, and of course hosting the sailing of the 2012 Olympics. But we're here for another reason. We're passionate about an archaeological dig taking place at the site of the municipal offices. Modern day Weymouth, as we know it, was once two towns, and it wasn't joined as one town until 1571 by an Act of Parliament. We're here on the Weymouth side of the harbour, but the other side, famous for the sandy beach, was Melcombe Regis. Weymouth was actually so called because it was at the mouth of the River Wey, and there is some speculation there was a Roman harbour here. But I'd like to take you back to medieval times, to the year 1252. And this street here, High West Street, or High Street as it was in medieval times, was a really important street. It had just received its charter. William of Taunton, who was the prior of St Swithin's Priory in Winchester, who owned the land, had given Weymouth this really important charter. Now this charter meant that we had the right to hold a market here. And that was extremely important. It meant that people could trade here. It meant that the economy could grow. It meant that people could come from anywhere and sell their goods. And of course the medieval time was a time for growth, for trade, for the economy. It was a really busy time. Let's think about what it might have been like. The smell would have been the first thing that hit you, because as you came down this high street, there would have been a gully in the middle of the road. There would have been feces, animal entrails, there might have been blood from bloodletting. Would have really smelt horrible. The people only had one set of clothes and they didn't wash. That would have been another smell. Also, the colours would have been bright and cheerful, and it would have been very noisy. A real hub of activity with people coming to sell their goods. And that market really enabled this little town of Weymouth to grow along this one main street. Sadly, as time's gone on, the street has changed. Jockey Row is no longer here, Silver Street is no longer here, and there's been massive changes. And here I am at the bottom of Love Lane. Love Lane was definitely here in the 1700s when all these lovely cottages would have been thatched. And up there on the hill would have been the Chapel of Chapel Hay, a chapel of ease dedicated to St Nicholas. And in Coker's survey of Dorsetshire in the 1600s, he actually mentioned this high street. He said it was one long street that led right the way down to the sea, and that people had to walk 80 steps of stone to get up to their chapel. But of course, the Black Death, the 100 Years' War, that caused a great decline in Weymouth's economy. But this site of High West Street has such an important tale to tell a little bit later on. So let's hear about that. So I'm here with historian, local author and founder of Dig the Street, Mark Vine. Mark, can you tell us why this site is so important in Weymouth's history?
It was the site of a very large, some people call it a skirmish, a battle during the English Civil War. On the night at midnight on the 27th of February 1645, as many as 2,000 people stormed through the gate that used to stand there. There's only the stone remaining now. They poured on down this old medieval high street behind us, and were basically thinking to themselves that the battle was already won. But when they got to the bottom, the parliamentarian commander, Colonel William Sydenham, local boy from Winford Eagle in Dorset, had set an ambush, 3 or 4 cannon, several hundred muskets on every rooftop, every doorway. And when the royalist soldiers got down there, remember it was gone midnight, it was freezing cold, it was dark, and Sydenham let them get so far, then he opened up cannon and musket, killing at least 200 of them where
Wow.
they stood, wounding hundreds more. And after that, Sydenham's troops rushed out, got the grips of them hand to hand, basically chased them back up here and out of the town.
Wow. Can you imagine in this small medieval high street that going on? The noise, the fear, the bloodshed, the streets would have been red with blood. It must have been absolutely terrifying. It's just so hard to imagine that. Yeah.
none of us can imagine it today.
I know, and that's why it's just so important that this site is remembered.
It's just one of the reasons.
Please do forgive my state of undress, for I have not been on this earth for many a year, and much has changed. I hear that the history of this place is in peril.
It is, certainly. Can you tell us who you are?
Yes, please do forgive me, which is very amiss of me. I am Richard Wiseman, personal surgeon to His Sacred Majesty King Charles II. Or rather, I was. For I was, as a young man, in the year of our Lord 1645, present at the surprise retaking of Weymouth and Melcombe by Colonel Sydenham's parliamentarian rebels, those fanatics, and I tell you, fanatics they were indeed, with their ferocity the likes I have never seen before. I remember now, I was within half a musket shot of the steps leading to the great chapel fort, which once stood here, which is what makes me distressed. Where is the fort? I was within half a musket shot of those steps, and they attacked. The steps that I see just over there, covered in trees and vegetation. I remember now, I was treating one of Lieutenant Colonel Ballard's troops. Yes, he'd sustained a wound to his heel, and it was proving stubborn to my use of dossals, pledgets and astringents, and I had to resort to actual cautery to stem the flux of blood from that wound. I did hear that bell on that very day, and I had just finished treating him, bound him up. I had some success, sent him on his way, when I heard from the direction of the fort, I heard a shout, "Fly! The fort is taken! Flee for your lives!" This surprised me muchly, for I had thought that the place in which we were was secure. So I got up out of the works I was in to see what was happening, and I saw our people from the direction of the fort running away, and they were being fired upon by pistol and musket shot, and amongst them there was a man waving a stumped arm at me. I thought this strange. I did not recognise him. He was shouting at me. He was shouting, "Chirurgeon! Chirurgeon! Surgeon! Surgeon!" So I went out to see if I could help him. Ha! I recognised him. He was one of the Irish troops who I'd had occasion to dismember only 3 days previously, where he'd had a strange accident where his musket had break, and he was firing it, and it blew most of his hand away, and I had to take the ragged remnants back to 4 fingers above the carpals. Now, this man, he will survive, for we ran together and he outran me quite. But the while, during that whole conflict, I witnessed a barbarous absence of human sentiments in all classes and on both sides of that conflict. There was a cold-hearted apathy to acts of cruelty and callousness, the likes of which I would not like to see again, which is why I implore you, do not forget your history. Dig amongst all this. Tell the story of those of my time and those who were before me. Please do not forget us. But most of all, I must ask of you, do not forget my name, for I was Richard Wiseman, and I must go now.
So we now stood outside the Boot, which is Weymouth's oldest pub, and many spirits are meant to inhabit this pub too, and not only the drinking kind. And Mark, you're going to tell us about what happened here on the site of the old High Street. It's not like it was anymore, is it? What on earth happened?
It's been decimated. In the 1960s, the then Weymouth Council got it into their heads that the old High Street was ruined, it was dilapidated.
It was bombed as well, wasn't it?
It was
in World
bombed.
War II.
It was bombed up in Chapel Hay, and I
Okay.
think some of the damage, came down the slopes. The thing is, like any council at the time, they used dilapidation and lack of doing anything to make buildings look worse than they actually were. The old High Street contained many medieval, Tudor, Stuart buildings, absolutely priceless today, but in those days, Philistine councils were 10 a penny, and they decided to knock the whole lot down to give themselves a nice new office block with a sea view.
And the wonderful Tudor house that stood here, that had an amazing staircase, I believe, and rumour has it that the stones of the old Tudor house were just tossed into the harbour with no regard at all.
Those
an
and
important
many
historical
others.
building.
It was an architectural crime, nothing less.
Which is
Nothing
just
less.
awful, and we can see in the shots here that what replaced it was the municipal offices, which by any account are a real carbuncle.
There are no words to describe.
Fortunately,
that place.
of course, the council offices are no longer in use, and this area is going to be developed, and this is why we're so passionate about an archaeological dig, as are many other people in the Weymouth area. And let's go and speak to them. We've got a fantastic crowd of Weymouth people here to support Dig the Street, and one of them is Hayden, and Hayden found an extraordinary letter which Mark is going to tell us all about.
Yeah, the letter Hayden found was from Sir Lewis Dive, who was the King's commander in Dorset, and it basically said that to keep Weymouth, the very crown of England depends on it. And as soon as I read that, I realised that what he was talking about was a rumour that most people have dismissed down the years, that the King had sent his Queen, French Catholic Queen Henrietta Maria, across to France to negotiate the landing somewhere in England of a 25,000 strong French Catholic army.
Wow.
What is said in that letter tends to lend a bit of weight to that theory.
Absolutely, and again, it's just another piece of evidence that means it's so important to dig this land. And I'm going to ask some of the local people why it's important to them. So Lorraine. Hi, thanks so much for coming. Why is it important to you that we dig this area?
This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. When that comes down, if we don't find out what's underneath it, there's going to be houses for the next 200 years. You're never going to get in there. Weymouth is a jewel of history. Let's not lose it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Christine.
But what do I think? Well, I personally think, as somebody who was the mayor and who offered to support 100% having a proper dig here and not just a tick box, it would be lovely. And I'm an interloper of only 22 years, so I don't know an awful lot about history, but I know that this means an awful lot to people, and I just think it would be interesting for our children and those after them to actually see what's gone on. We don't want to be soulless and not know what's going on in our town. So I fully support it. 100%.
Thank you. And Peter.
Hello. I think it's a very, very important once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to examine the important remains that will be below here, both from the Civil War period, the fantastically busy Civil War period, as well as dating back to the Romans and the supply of the Dorchester garrison in Dorchester up the road.
Lovely, thank you. So you can see that there are many of us that are absolutely so passionate about having this dig here. This is a once in a lifetime, our only chance now to dig this street, find out what's underneath it, see if there's anything Roman, anything medieval. Imagine the troops that Mark talked about charging down this street, the bloodletting. This is now, we have to see what's going on. So what do we want, everybody? Dig the street! Thank you so much for watching our podcast. If you want to find out more, please go to Dig the Street on Facebook, follow the Facebook page. We will let you know what you can do next. And I would like to leave you in the hands of Richard Wiseman, who will close our show for today.
Please do not forget who we were.